Hello and welcome to the fifth edition of Table Talk. My name is Aron and for the next 45 to 55 minutes, we are going to be talking about Airtable automations. So if you're new to Table Talk is our weekly live stream where I showcase one part of Airtable by answering your questions. So do encourage you to go into the chat, say hi, and we have a form where you can submit questions that we're going to add to today's session. So if you're new here, would love to have a wave in the chat. And even if you're not new, I'd love to know what is your, the one thing you would love to automate. So let me know in the chat what would be that one thing in your life that you would love to automate outside of Airtable. So you're not allowed to use Airtable itself. What is one thing for myself? I think it'd probably be laundry, right? If I could find a way to just have that done every week, that would be amazing. Some familiar faces in the chat. Hey, Ben. Hey, Tommy. Hey, Matthew. Hey, Megan. Amanda. I saw Vipul, Opie. Lots of folks. Really appreciate you, all of you jumping into the chat. So I'm going to address something. I spilled coffee on my shirt, but luckily I have some backups. So if I could automate my laundry, I would have definitely done that. So we got some, Kovan would love to drive their kid around automated. That would be amazing. Totally agree. Ben, the rule was nothing in Airtable. So we're going to get to that a little later. Cool. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about our agenda for today. So you folks have submitted some questions. So do you want to get to those? So what are we going to talk about today? Jumping into our agenda. So first, as always, we're just going to cover what is an automation. Some of you might be more experienced users. Do want to have everyone on the same foot. Then talk about some common use cases. I'll create a few automations just so we get really comfortable. And then a question that's actually really interesting is how do you use Airtable Sync versus Airtable automations, right? So you really understand when to use one versus the other, can be confusing. And then how do you think about time-based automation? So there's different ways in which you can automate, say, every Monday, or when a specific time has been selected, right? So that's a fourth question. Fifth is how can you make your notifications a little more dynamic, right? How can you have them be sending the exact information that you want that's tailored to the recipient? Fifth question, how can I sync Google Sheets with Airtable to track client interactions? And fan favorite, did I get a new scanner? So I'm going to keep that one for the end because, again, I have no promises that my new scanner works. I'm hoping, and I've tested it, but these live things have a life of their own, as you know. Again, this is our agenda. These are the questions we've picked, but feel free to use the form to submit questions as well. And before I kind of get started here, two other forms that you should be aware of. One, we're going to be giving out swag at the end, some Airtable swag. There's some winners. So if you have one, Rebecca, Tommy, if you let people know if you're enjoying your swag. Second, we also have a form to submit if you want to get one-to-one help with an Airtable expert. If anything we're showing, you're like, hey, I wonder how to implement this, or you've got a use case that you're wondering how to use Airtable for, do go ahead and fill out the form. Okay, that was the introduction. Really appreciate you all joining us today. So let's jump into what is an automation. So I'm going to go into my kind of content management base. So just an overview of the use case before we jump in. We are a furniture company manufacturing different products. And these are the different pieces of furniture that we're hoping to launch this year. And this base manages all of the kind of content we're going to create to get people familiar with the product and hopefully to get them to buy that product. So we have a sync table. These are all of the pieces of furniture we're launching this year. And then campaigns. So each piece of furniture has a campaign around it where we track, what status that campaign is, different launch dates, the assets. And then for each campaign, you'll notice that there are these little channels. These are the individual pieces of content, the tweets, the Facebook posts, the blog posts that we want to create, that we want to target for that specific campaign. And so you'll notice these kind of linked records here. So for each campaign, we create a set of linked records, one for each channel that we want to target. And then in content pipeline, we have that pipeline for each individual piece of content, right? So you'll notice that there's a tweet for Traverse Coffee Table, a Facebook post, blog post, so on and so forth. And really, this is where individual content is created and their status is tracked. So our goal is to find some elements in this that we can automate. So what is automations within Airtable? So within Airtable, you can use Airtable automations to create custom logic, right? That says, if this happens, then I want this other thing to happen. So for instance, you might say, well, when a new product is in my launches table, that's a product that we might not be aware of, I want to go ahead and send a notification to the team to let them know that we have to go ahead and start planning that campaign. So there's a specific moment in your workflow where you'd like something to happen. In this case, when a new record is created or added to the launches table, go ahead and send a Slack notification to the team. Or it might be, well, when a campaign is prioritized, go ahead and create the action items, the pieces of content that we want to go ahead and create for that campaign. If you're using a project use case, again, project is in progress. What are the action items for that project? Can we create them automatically? So it creates this kind of logic on top of your Airtable base to automate different steps and really be able for you to focus on the important things and not on making sure that you're following the precise steps that you need. So just to get started, let's do a very simple one, which is when a record is created in our launches table, that means a new product is prioritized. Let's go ahead and send a Slack message to the team, letting them know that a new campaign needs to be created for that specific launch. So just as a reminder here, this is a sync table. So that means that new records coming into this table come from this base. So this is our product roadmap. And the view that we have synced is this launches view, right? So you'll notice that it's been shared, it's synced. And this is syncs whenever status is any of locked or launched. So to create a new record in our campaign table, let's go to our Kanban view here, and let's say we want to, let me rename this to new shoe. There we go. And if I move that into locked, that means, I'm not sure why we have a shoe in our base here, but let me just go update the information. We're now a shoe store. There we go. Let's give this 15,000. Let's give this brass. Here we go. And now this new record, this new shoe, should appear as a new record. So we're going to go ahead and say when a new record is created in our launches table, let's go ahead and send an in a notification. So I'm going to go into automations. So you notice that there's some examples here, and I'll get to those in a moment. Let's create a new automation from scratch. So first you have to name it. We're going to call this new product launch. And then you have a trigger. So every automation has a trigger. This is what sets your automation in motion, right? And you have a list that you can pick from. So this is saying, when this happens, I want this automation to run. So in our case, we're going to pick when a record is created. So some of you might be recognizing the new UI. Happy to answer any questions about the new UI as well and why we moved that there. Cool. So when a record is created, you'll hear the configuration. You need to say which table a new record needs to be created in for this automation to run. That's in our launches table. And then action. These are the steps, the things you want your automation to do. In our case, we want to go ahead and send a Slack notification, but you can do a lot of things. You can send a notification, update a Google Calendar, or send one. Or in our case, we want to send a Slack message. Slack is what the team uses to collaborate. So I'm going to go to my 4 Oaks Fern. I'm going to go to my social campaigns channel. And then I can be custom with the message I want to send. So we're going to say a new product is locked. Learn more here. And here, oh, let's actually give it, it's called. Let's give it a name. It's called. So we're trying to customize this message as much as we want. So I'm going to go click the plus button, go from step 1, and insert the name of the record. This is the name of the product that's launching. So this is going to read a new product is locked. It's called. and then input from step 1. Let's actually go to step 1 and run the test to see which record it would pull out. There we go. Let me see what it brought in here. XU table lamp is the record that we found. That's great. And we can say learn more here. We're going to insert the record URL. So I'm going back to step 1, inserting the record URL. And now it's read a new product is locked. It's called. It's going to put in the name and provide the URL of the record so someone can go in and click and easily access that information. A few more specifications. You can give your bot a name, an icon, and whether or not to unfurl links. So if you're sending a lot of links and create a lot of noise, you can turn that off and on. And I do believe that's a new feature. If I'm not sure, let me know in the chat if you've seen this before. So let's go ahead and turn this on. And let me go ahead and run a test. That's going to go ahead and send the message. And I can see an example right here. So this is my Slack channel. I have a new product is locked. It's called XU table lamp. And then learn more here. It brings me, if I would click that URL, it would bring me to Airtable and to that record. So that's an example of an automation. Now, whenever we create a new product, the campaign team or the product team creates a new product, moves it to locked, it gets synced into our table, creates a record in our table, and that will send a notification to the team, letting them know that they need to go ahead and start working on that campaign. So one less thing to worry about. Now, quickly before we consider this done, I do want to point you to, if you click help here and search automations. So this is a new in-product help center. If you're ever wondering about automations, you have these little GIFs that walk you through specific automation. But there are also these videos that we relaunched this week with the new UI that you can click to. So these, since you've been watching this, probably not useful to you, but if ever someone on your team is like, hey, I wonder how to use automations, do encourage you to bring them to the in-product help center where they can access videos in the in-product help center. Cool. Okay, brief introduction. Hopefully that puts everyone on the same level, same understanding before we dive into some more complex. And now the moment Kuvon and everyone else has been waiting for. Confetti. Awesome. Never, ever loses its fun. Okay, so second, what are some... Because before I go to the next question, I know I'm seeing a lot of folks come in here. Swag, 3 forms. 1, swag. Go ahead and fill that out. We're going to give that out at the end. Second, if you have a question, go ahead and submit it into the form as well. Third, if you need help setting up your base, wondering how to use Airtable, we have a one-to-one help form where you can get the chance to get an Airtable expert to help you out. Okay, number 2, what are some common use cases for Airtable automations? Well, here we're going to go a little quicker and I'm going to build some more and just kind of give you an overview of what are some examples of what you can do. So the 3, I would say, broad categories that we're going to cover and that are useful for Airtable automations. The first is sending a notification. We just did that. So when this happens in your workflow, you want to go ahead and send an email, send a Slack message, might be to remind someone that they need to review, want to send a customer that the delivery is ready, whatever moment in your workflow where you need to notify customers or users, Airtable automations. Second is auto-creating things in Airtable, maybe auto-creating a record, updating information in your base based on what happens. An example of this, and we're going to do this in a moment, where you say when a campaign is prioritized, go ahead and create the different content pieces we need to create. So that's use case number 2, where you want to automate things in Airtable. And number 3 is connecting to external applications. So one might be updating Salesforce information or sending a tweet when the tweet is ready to be sent. So those are the 3 broad categories of things you can do with Airtable automations. Those are not exhaustive. There are other things you can do with Airtable, but those are the 3 most common. So do you want to bring your attention here to some pre-built examples? Right? So send a Slack message, that's category number 1. Create a new record, that's category number 2, when you want to automate things within Airtable. And then connecting to third-party tools like Twitter, you can have pre-built examples here in the bottom. So great place to start. So let's do that second example, right? Where we wanted to create linked records, create action items automatically when our workflow requires. So in my case, coming back to my campaigns table, let me walk you through it and then we'll build it. You'll notice that when I move a campaign into building, that's when I create the content action items I want to create, right? So I want to create records in my content pipeline for that specific campaign. And we want to create them specifically for the channels that we've targeted. So Twitter and Facebook, we want one action item, one piece of content that we're going to create for each one of those channels. So here the logic is when my campaign is building, go ahead and create that record in the content pipeline. So when our campaign record is moved into building, go ahead and create a content pipeline record for that specific channel. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go to Airtable Automations, just checking the chat. There's some questions. So do use the form and Hallie will, or a colleague will kind of route it into our agenda. I'm seeing some questions here. Cool. Okay, so let's create a custom automation. We're going to build it from scratch. So I'm going to call this, what did I call the other ones? Let me just come back here. Create action item. Okay, we're going to call it that as well. So let's rename. Create. So action item. So let's do Twitter. Now, another pro tip, this does take up the whole screen. You can make it a little shorter here so you can see your base at the same time. So that's just one, we got some feedback that this was useful where you can see the view, see the information in your base and automations. Cool, so what we wanna do here is when a record matches condition, so when a record in the campaign table has status building, that's when we want to run this automation. So we're gonna select when record matches condition. And we're gonna go ahead and go into our campaigns table. And then you notice I need to specify the condition that a record needs to have in order for this automation to run. So when status is building, that's my first condition. Now I want to create one linked record for every action, for every channel. So in this case, I'm gonna add a second condition where I say, and channel has any of Twitter, right? And I'll talk a little bit about why we put those two conditions in at the end when we look at the 3 automations you need to build in order to do this, right? So next, what we want to do from here is to go ahead and create the record in our content pipeline for that specific channel. So let's go ahead and create a record. That's our action. Boom. It's going to say which table do we want to create a record in? Content pipeline. And then we need to pre-fill the fields that we already know. So if I make it a little smaller, let's select here. Going to go to content pipeline. Let's give ourselves a view that we understand a little better. Let's go by channel. There we go. Okay, so the status I know the channel as well, so I can pre-fill that. And I also know the campaign that it's related to. So coming back to post by status, I know the product, I know what type it is. So let's just go fill out those fields. So first is the name. You'll notice that they always have the same structure. So this is going to be a Twitter. And then the name of the product, which we can grab from step 1. It's going to be product. And we're going to insert the name. That's the name of the product. So it's going to read Twitter and then the name of the product. Next, we want to create a linked record to the product itself. Oh, that's the lookup field. So we don't need to fill that out. It's associated to the campaign. But we do need to fill in the campaign. There we go. We're going to pull this from step 1, campaign name. We're going to pre-fill the status as well to unassigned. So we're just filling out the information that we already know for that specific piece of content. There we go. And let me go back to my automation here. Full screen. There we go. So we're saying when a record matches condition, go ahead and create that record. So let me run a test to get which one we're going to pull in. And that we can now run this automation. So what this is going to do is create a Twitter in the content pipeline for that specific channel. Give me a thumbs up in the chat if this is making sense. I feel like I might be going a little quick here, but do want to make sure that everything makes sense. Great. So let me go ahead and turn this on. Let me just make sure I filled out everything correctly. Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, perfect. Okay. Awesome. So we've turned this automation on. And now you'll notice that when we move a campaign into building, it's going to go ahead and run this automation. There we go. And we see those two linked records automatically created. So this is the one we created with the automation we've just run, or we've just created. You can see that it was created by Airtable Automations. Another place where you can see this is if I go into action item Twitter and I go into run history, you'll notice that it just ran when we did it. But you'll notice that there's a second one, Facebook posts, right? And that's because we had created 4 automations, one for each type of content that we're going to go ahead and use in our different campaigns. And so we have 4 automations, one for each possible channel, and each one of those creates a linked record for that specific campaign. So this automates a step in our workflow so we can always create content when we're ready. Okay, seeing a lot of thumbs up. Awesome. Appreciate that. I felt like I was going a little quickly, but seems like everyone followed. Do want to show you one more example. So we've done send a notification, create linked records, and the third is connect to an external application. In our case, let's go ahead and when we're ready to send a tweet, right? So this is an example of a tweet. We move it to ready to publish. We want to go ahead and send that tweet off. So let me create a view where we see that information a little better, post by platform. Let's go ahead and traverse coffee table is the tweet that we want to start drafting, and then move it to ready to publish. And when it's in ready to publish, we're going to go ahead and send it off. So we're going to create another automation. New automation. It's going to say send tweet. Our trigger is going to be when record matches condition again in our content pipeline table. And we want to send a tweet when the status is ready to publish. And notice the and here, channel is Twitter. So that's an example of that and. It's similar to what we had done before. What we want to go ahead and do is send the tweet. So Twitter, I want to post the tweet. I've got my 4 Oaks Fern account. And here, let's just make this a little smaller. You'll notice that I already have the copy here in the record itself. So I'm going to grab that from step 1. I'm going to insert that copy. So let's go write it out. So this tweet was sent from Airtable Automations. How cool. Because it's cool. It's definitely cool. As an attachment, let's go ahead and import this asset. So again, going to step 1, inserting that asset into the attachment field. I'm just going to copy paste for this example, right? And now we have all of the elements we need for our tweet. But something else I want to do here, and this is something you can do with Airtable Automations, is update the status to posted once the tweet was sent. So let me go back into automations, add a second action here, which is update record. So go to that record, update its status to posted. So I'm going to go to my content pipeline to specify which record we want to update via its record ID. So I'm going to go to step 1. I'm going to insert the record ID, and the field I want to update is status. Let me just make sure I'm writing it correctly. It's posted like that. That way it's going to fill that out. Going back, okay. I have that. So just reading this one last time before I run it. When a record has channel equal Twitter, status is ready to be posted, it's going to send the tweet and then update that record to be posted. So let's turn this automation on. Always important to remember to turn your automations on. There we go. Let me just make sure I've got it right here. Back. Send tweet is on. This one is ready to go. Let's go ready to publish. And this automation should run and do two things. It should send the tweet, which I can see that it has, and update to posted. So if I go to Twitter, I refresh my timeline, and we have our tweet sent from Airtable. So that was the third example, updating information or sending information to external application using Airtable automations. Confetti time. Let's do it. Amazing. Always a great feeling. So Emenda asked a question I'm going to answer right away, which is, can you do it with LinkedIn as well? The answer is sorta. So in the sense that we don't have a direct connection to LinkedIn. However, you can use Hootsuite, which we do have a direct connection with, and Hootsuite lets you send to LinkedIn. So if you're using Hootsuite, you can specify that this tweet or this record, the information in this record should be sent to LinkedIn. So that's an example of how to do it through a third party. Amazing. Okay, third and important question, Airtable sync versus Airtable automations. So we luckily in this space have an example of both. So in our launches table, we have information coming from our product team, and we have automations sending information out and coming in. So sync is very useful when you want to have up-to-date information. So in this case, I don't want to be notified when a new product is locked. I want to have all of the information for each product up to date at all times. So this means that if anything changes, whether it's a launch date, so let's say the launch date is now the 28th instead of the 14th. If I update that information in the product roadmap, like I just did, this information is going to be pulled into my sync. So you'll notice that this is now the 28th. Now, doing the same thing with automations is possible. You could potentially say, well, when this happens, do that, right? But you would have to create so many automations to keep everything in sync. So whenever you want things that are updated there to be reflected elsewhere at all times, that is a use case for Airtable sync, right? So there are different sources. I made an example of Airtable, but you can sync from Salesforce, Jira, Google Cloud, Box, Outlook. And we just talked about how to sync from Calendar in one of the tooltips this week. That's the first advantage of sync. The second is that the information lives in Airtable and you could add more records. Let me close this out. So in this case, I'm actually associating each product to its respective campaign. So not only am I syncing that information, but then I can add additional information on top. So that is Airtable sync. Now, automations is for when you want to do, if this happens, do that. So in this case, when we're saying when a project is prioritized or when a campaign is in building, go ahead and create the linked record items. If this project is assigned, go ahead and send a notification to the team, assign an editor, create a linked record, or send that information one time to another application. So sync and automations can sometimes overlap, right? But are two distinct. So sync is great when you're saying, I want to keep this information up to date from Airtable or from an external source. And automation is great when you're saying the sentence, if this happens, project is prioritized, record created, form submitted, go ahead and do this thing once, right? Go ahead and send a message, update information, send to an external application. So very, very useful, both, but are distinct. Does that feel right? Happy to answer any questions around Airtable sync versus automations. So we're feeling good about this one. Cool. Let's go ahead and drop that confetti. Amazing. Welcome, Anna. Appreciate you joining Table Talk. Glad you're a fan. Amazing. New mug, by the way. Feels right. Feels very much with the set. Okay. Okay, is it possible to automate a task based on time and not only by date? So question from Kin. I'm gonna generalize this question in saying, how do you automate based on time? So let's say you want a tweet to go out at a specific time, or maybe you want to go ahead and every morning send an email with every campaign that is in building, right? So that every morning you want something to happen. So let's cover that and talk about how you can schedule automations. So far we've been saying if this, right? So if a new record is created, if, let me go into actions here or triggers. I've been saying when a record matches specific conditions, when a record is updated, when a record enters a view, those are the if this happens, go ahead and do that. Well, you can also have if it's this specific time of the day, so at 1 p.m. or every Monday or every month, every 8th of the month, go ahead and run this automation. And that's particularly useful when you have cycles. So one example that I'm going to show off here, which is every Monday morning, send an email with everything that's in progress, right? So every campaign that is in building. So this email digest type notification is very useful on automating based on a specific time. So I'm going to call this send update on campaigns in progress. And it's going to be a time-based automation. So I'm very bad at naming my automations and my fields and my views. So in this case, we're going to say when at a scheduled time. Right, so this is our trigger, and then we can select at what interval we want to run this. Every 5 minutes, every 15 minutes, every set of hour, so every hour or every 8 hours. In our case, we're going to run it every Monday, so every week on Monday, right, at 1 p.m. Eastern, so you can specify an exact time, and I think this was part of the question. So when you specify your interval, you can also specify at what moment in the day you want this automation to run. I don't like to send emails before 10 a.m. So let's set 10 a.m. starting. So let's say we're going to start this on Sunday. That way we're sure that it runs on Monday. And what we want this to do, what actions we want to run, well, maybe you want to create a record. So every morning you want to create a record to remind people to send a tweet, right? Or send a notification to say, hey, tell me what you're working on today, right? So you can have that scheduled time-based automation. And Kovon, I agree with you. I am working on my naming conventions. Drop some tips in the chat of how you think about naming your automations. I'm sure folks have great suggestions. I am terrible, frankly, at it. And it's something I should be better at. Okay. So we want to say at 10 a.m. every Monday, go ahead and find everything we have in progress, right? So we want to find, where's our find? Under Airtable. There we go. I had it right here. Find records. So this is saying find all the records that have a specific criteria that we'd like to send over. So let's go ahead and go to our campaigns. And what we want, let me just make this a little smaller. We want every campaign that is building. So we want to send a message with this kind of grid, right, with this information to the team, letting them know that everything is in progress. So we're going to go ahead and create a condition. Now note, you can also say send everything that's in a view. So I did see a question from OP around views. You can also specify an existing view if you already have it. I much prefer conditions. So we're gonna say where campaign status is building, right? So it's gonna go ahead at 10 a.m. every Monday, find all the records. And what we wanted to do is to send an email. So we can send an email to the team. So I'm just gonna send it to myself as an example. So building campaigns and building. Campaigns being built in building. That feels about right. And here I can go to step 1 or step 2, the find records action, grab the records, and I can have them as a list or as a grid. So I'm gonna go ahead and insert them as a grid. And I could select what information I want to show up in that grid. So status makes sense. The channels we're targeting, which product it's for, launch date, owner, that feels right as well. Let me move myself out of the way, apologies. Seems like I can't move myself out of the way. There we go. And now we're back. And so what I've selected is status, channels, product, launch date, owner. Let's insert that. So it's saying send as a grid. And let me go to step 2. Let me run a test to see what it pulls out. And I can run another test here just to see what the example is. Let's preview that email. And every Monday at 10 a.m., it's going to go ahead and send this email with this grid in it with all of the information around my campaign. I can make this a little nicer by adding here is everything that is in building. Amazing. To review that, I have that little title and then the grid of what we're sending every Monday at 10 a.m. to turn that on. And now I have a time-based automations. So that's one example. Now, quickly, I'm just going to talk about another one where let's say you want to send a tweet at a specific time. I'm not going to build this one, but what you can create is a tweet time field. And then you could create a formula that checks whether it's that exact time. And if it is, you can have a condition that checks whether that's the case and then sends that tweet. So you can also use formulas and views together to automate based on a specific time. So that was an example where we're saying every day at X, at 10 a.m., at 1 p.m., every week, every month. And that here, what we're talking about is at this specific time that's specified in the record, we want to go ahead and run an automation. That's also possible, but would require a formula and then a condition that checks that. Cool, that's one example. So yeah, there are limitations to that, Kuvo, and thanks for letting folks know that the now can be a little finicky and that it won't send at that precise moment because it has to run every interval as well. So that was Kin's question based on time. There we go. Feeling good? Amazing. So Emenda, there's a question around automating dedupe. You can run a script, for instance. There are a lot of ways you can dedupe. I would recommend checking out the Learn Airtable scripting where we did a dedupe. There's the dedupe app. So there's a few ways you can dedupe. Maybe we'll do that in the speed round. Amazing. Okay, next. How can I make the text in automated notifications more dynamic? So this, I imagine, let me go back to the example we just had with the notification. So let's go into new product launch. Now you'll notice here that this automation will always send the following message. A new product is locked, it's called, and then the name of the field and the exact URL of the record of the campaign. Now, you can make this much more dynamic. Let's say when a specific status is selected, you want to go ahead and send a message that is specific to that status. So one example might be when a campaign is building or when a new product is launched, depending on the type of product, you want to go ahead and send you may want to send a different message here. So I'll just quickly build this out as an example of how to really make your messages dynamic by using a formula field. So let's say here I want to say, well, if it's a table, you know, let's say send out the steps to create a new table campaign. So we're going to say campaign message. It's going to be a formula field, and I'll just quickly do this. Here we're saying if, I think it's type, or what fields do I have here? I have, category. Category equals tables. Let's have the message be, this is a new table. Remember, step 1 is to check its price. And then you can have different examples of messages. So this is not a table, for instance, just as an example. So we're creating a field. So you have this specific field. And this is particularly useful maybe if you have specific steps that you want to send to the team, but just maybe you want customer information, depending on the type of delivery that you're scheduling. Maybe there are different indications to that customer. And I think that was the spirit of this question, right? So now I have this field available to me in my automation. So I'm going to go to automation. I'm going to go ahead and new product launch. Remember to always rerun the test. That way you get that new field. So if I go to field values, campaign message, this is not a table. And then I could use that message in my notification in Slack as well. So let's call this, is this a table? And we can go to step 1. Campaign message. So this is going to say this is not a table because our test is not a table. Let's update that and let's test again. All right, if we go to Slack and it says this is not a table. If it had been a table, it would have said here are the steps to create a table. So that was one example, but particularly useful when you have very granular steps that you need to take based on the status. So you can create a complex or simple formula field that has the message you want to go ahead and send. Particularly useful, I imagine, in event management, you know, how to access the event, deliveries, things like that. You can really use formulas together with automations to be extremely custom. So I feel like that question was answered. Go ahead and get this a thumbs up. Amazing. Okay, cool. Okay, so did I get a new scanner? The answer is yes, but I think the more important question is, does the scanner work? That is maybe. Listen, I'm not going to say anything because last time I said that the scanner worked, it didn't. So if you weren't here about, I think 2 weeks ago, I tried for about a good 5 minutes to scan something live on the stream and it did not pan out. So since then, I've gotten a new scanner. Looks a lot like the old scanner. So let me go into my furniture inventory. So if you're not familiar with how scanners work, just quickly, you scan a barcode. It returns a alphanumeric code, and it's extremely useful to search on information. So because we're using a database, we can go ahead and see if I can find this lamp right here. Let me go into full mode. So we want to go ahead, scanner. I want to scan the box that this lamp came in and see if I can find it in my base. I've got barcode, scanner, and let's see if this works. So let me go into the base, where my inventory management. I'm going to Control F to find something. I have to say I'm a little stressed out about this. So let's see. I'm having flashbacks. Definitely working better than last time, but still won't scan. Come on, scanner. It's a cruel joke. So I'm clearly scanning it. Let me see with less light. Yes! It worked. Okay, see there, it filled out. This worked. Got the scan. Do not recommend getting this scanner either. I'm not gonna say what it was, but we got it to work. So that's how you scan. Ideally, you don't do it live on the stream. Ideally, you don't do it with a bunch of overhead cameras, but it does work, and that was the proof that it does. Amazing, amazing. Whew. All is good. We saved it. Okay. Yeah, we definitely need a confetti to get over that. Whew. And a little bit of water. Okay, let's get into the speed round. So now we're gonna do about a minute. I try to keep it to a minute. Frankly, usually fail. Now is a good time to go ahead and fill out the swag form. We're gonna do that in about 3 to 5 minutes, depending. Fill out the form to either ask questions. We're gonna keep adding to this. And third, if you want that one-to-one guidance with an Airtable expert for yourself or for someone you're working with, go ahead and fill that out before I start the speed round here in a minute. Okay, let's set the timer on. I'm gonna read the question before the timer. So, can I sync Airtable and Google Sheets to track client interactions? So the answer is yes. What you can do is use the trigger. So let me go back here and create a new automation. That is, when a row is created, go ahead and create a record in Airtable. So let's imagine I have my customers. I want to, update Jessica in my customer table. I don't have that, but I'll just run it as an example. Let's go to Google Sheets. Let me go here, customers, like that. The worksheet would be customers. Run the test. There we go. We've got our customer spreadsheet, and now I can create a record. So every time a new row is appended to my sheet, it's going to go ahead and create a record. You can send a message. You can do whatever you want, just like we did before. So when a row is created in Airtable, you can go ahead and update information in Airtable or use automations just like before. Cool. So when testing a trigger, how does Airtable pick the test record? How can the user know which test record was picked? How? So that's a really, timer. Okay, I believe that the test that was, the record that's picked is the first one created in that view or that has those conditions. Right, so let's go back to our, which one we had here, new record created, new product launch, record is created. So how it picks, I believe, and this I can check after, and it will send me a message if you really want to know. I think it's the first record in that view or that has the specific conditions that you've picked out, right? So that is how it picks that one. However, you can always see which record was picked when you test and click down, and you have all of the information, right? So one example is this one right here. So it has the launches table, and you could see which record it was picked. You can see the record ID and the different field values. Yeah, so I think it'll pick the first created field that has the conditions if the view is not picked. So Colvin, that is a good technical question. I'll ask exactly to the team, what are the exact criteria if you're not on a view? Yeah, hopefully that makes sense. So, and then in each one, you can see all of the information. Now note that like something like a status field has a multiple, it has an identifier for the status, it has a name and the color, which are all elements you can pull out in following steps. Cool, that was way over a minute. Great. Please demo the setting of permissions of a field so that it can only be updated via automation. Great. Okay, great question. Let me reset the timer. Okay, so what you can do is any field can be limited to certain collaborators that can edit, right? So let's go here. I can do edit field permissions. And here I can say who can edit this specific field. And by default, it's editors and up. So everyone who's an editor can edit information in your base and up. So creators, owners, so on and so forth. And then you can also have creators and up. So these are editors cannot edit this field. So that is one specification. There are specific users. Now, by default, only creators can create automations in Airtable base. So if you want your automation to only be able to update it by automation, you can set creators and up as an example. Oh, it's not a question. Okay, cool. That's something. Yeah, exactly. So you can specify here who can update the automation. Well, it wasn't a question, but we're still going to show it off for folks so that they can understand. So you can limit who can update information in your base. Amazing. Okay, cool. There we go. Okay, that last question for today. We're about 5 minutes before. That's great. Team, can we pick a swag winner? So if you haven't yet, didn't want to talk over the confetti. Very important. Let's go ahead and draw this week's swag. Glass of water. Just waiting in the chat for who's going to win this week's swag. And important to note that the swag is actually sent via Airtable Automations. So if you win the swag, you're going to receive an automated email from myself letting you know that you've won. One note, there were a lot of questions around, specific roadmap questions. So do remember reaching out to support@airtable.com or checking out the community for questions around, when is a specific trigger or kind of more advanced things coming out. All right, swag winner is Emenda. Congratulations. I'm going to send you the swag right after this stream. Really appreciate all of you coming on today and coming to Table Talk. I hope you'll be back next week where we're going to be talking about formulas. Do submit your questions in advance. We review them right before we start the stream. Do fill out the one-to-one if you need support in Airtable and you need some help. But with that, really, really appreciate you coming this week. And I hope to see you all next week. Congratulations to Amanda for the swag and huge thanks to all of you for coming. That's it for me this week. I'll see you back here next week for Table Talk. Bye, everyone.